Hello and welcome to the Libertarian Perspective, a discussion of state, local, and national issues with a libertarian flair. My name is Doug Klippel. I'm the former state chairman of the Libertarian Party of Florida. We appreciate you tuning into today's broadcast. With me, my regular co-host, Phil Labe, regional representative for the Libertarian Party of Florida for up here in Northeast Florida. Phil, good to see you and thank you for joining the broadcast.
Great to be here, Doug.
Now, you know, Phil, obviously normally we do the national, state, and local issues, but we've actually got a special show here today where we're going to be focusing on local issues, primarily the upcoming election on March the 22nd. And to help us get into that issue, we have our friend John Winkler from the Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County. John, welcome to the Libertarian Perspective.
It's nice to be here.
Yeah, we certainly appreciate you taking the time to be part of the broadcast, and certainly Phil and I talk a lot about the Concerned Taxpayers here on our broadcast. Obviously, the Concerned Taxpayers is a nonpartisan organization, so you probably could safely say that almost all libertarians are concerned taxpayers, but not all concerned taxpayers are libertarians. But you folks offer a position on the issues that really should appeal to folks across the spectrum of the political scale.
Well, I think so, and we certainly have members that are representative of all major, minor, and non-parties.
Absolutely. Well, we've got a full show today, John. We've got a slide we're going to put up that actually talks about what we're going to be doing on today's broadcast. And as I mentioned, it is election time here in Duval County, and so we're going to be talking about that. And of course, encourage everybody to get out to vote on March the 22nd. We're going to talk about your Concerned Taxpayers Voters Guide, which is an exciting publication. It's being distributed in the Times-Union and other places, really for taxpayers that are concerned about fiscal responsibility and want candidates who are going to toe the line in terms of a city budget, an indispensable guide for voters. We're going to talk briefly about a review of the candidates and issues and why the Concerned Taxpayers made the endorsements that you did. Obviously, we're going to approach this from a fiscally conservative viewpoint, and as we mentioned, John, you're part of the Concerned Taxpayers group. You are the current candidate committee chair and the past president of the group. And so, very quickly, let's go ahead and roll to the next overhead. Just a very, very quick overview of the Concerned Taxpayers. As we mentioned, it is a nonpartisan organization. It's actually formed back in 1987. Boy, John, you've been at this for a while. And it was formed around this 3% cap on the property tax annual increase, that particular issue. Look at the mission statement: to prevent, identify, and publicize forms of fiscal waste, extravagance, and imprudence within and by the government which impacts Duval citizens. I don't know how anybody could disagree with that statement. And of course, it's comprised of dues-paying members and a board of directors as well. The mission statement, very, very, very quickly on the next slide. Fight against corporate welfare and incentives, support sunshine laws, competitive bidding, no selling of assets at less than market value. Encourage local officials to follow laws and rules. Boy, what an earth-shattering one that is. Engage in educational endeavors, receive funds and use them for. And of course, the website, which we're going to publicize regularly throughout our broadcast here, www.jaxtaxpayers.org. John, tell us a little bit briefly around how long you've been involved with the group and why it was a group that was of interest to you.
Well, I guess I've been involved with the Concerned Taxpayers for about 8 years. And frankly, they present a perspective that's lacking in, as you know, certainly in any of the major political parties, because it's focused on what we believe to be the ultimate individual right, which is the right to know what your government is doing and to participate in the process of determining what the income and expenditures of local government are going to be. That we really do view as completely nonpartisan. I mean, one of the things about the Voter's Guide is you can look in vain for any kind of party affiliation or even the fact that somebody has no party affiliation. That's information that to us is absolutely irrelevant in determining who should be a local candidate for office or who you should vote for as a local candidate.
Yeah, absolutely. And Phil, you know, we've talked before on this broadcast about how a lot of times officials, even that seem to be right-minded, once they get into office, there are always incredible pressures for them to increase spending, to approve special boondoggles. From what you've seen of the local races, do you have confidence that these candidates are actually going to toe the line and be tough fiscal conservatives?
No, except for a few people that already have been walking the walk and talking the talk, like Clay Yarborough and John Cressenbenny.
Yeah, well, and I think we'll see some of those names that are actually in the Voters Guide that we're going to get into in a minute. John, it certainly seems to me that, at least in terms of the political speak leading up to the election, a lot more people are talking about fiscal integrity. Did you hear those themes when you conducted the candidate interviews that were part of this process? And what faith do you have that these folks are actually going to toe the line?
Well, one of the things that we did, and this was different, and the reason that the Voter's Guide even exists, is that we decided early on, in fact, back in November, that we were going to try to make a head-to-head comparison between those elected officials that are incumbents running again and what the same positions on the same votes, the identical votes that those incumbents had taken, would be based for each of these candidates who was presenting themselves for office. Originally, we had something on the order of 70 city council candidates at that time that we sent questionnaires to. But we were very specific. We had 7 specific votes that we identified over the last couple of years that we thought would bring out these issues that we find important. Not just fiscal issues, but also no big contract issue with the Trail Ridge matter, and a vote on the Ethics Commission as well.
While you're mentioning that, let's go ahead and put up the next overhead, which is actually around the questions that you did ask on this Voter's Guide. And let's just go ahead and take a quick look. You basically looked at people's incumbents' votes, and for prospective candidates, or prospective office holders, you asked them how would they have voted on these issues. How would they have voted on the Jacksonville city budget? How would they have voted on the ad valorem taxes on the millage rates? How would they have voted on the Trail Ridge, which is that no-bid contract? How would they have voted on the increase in garbage fees and other fees that the Payton administration have imposed? The ethics in the charter bill, the Everbank Field revenue transfer, which was this deal when we named Everbank Field. Everbank was actually supposed to pay a certain amount for those naming rights, and the city council ended up not charging them basically for that amount. And how they voted on the unfunded correction officer pension plan and the 3% COLA bill. So you did have very, very specific criteria that you used to evaluate these candidates.
Well, yes, and I mean, and the benefit to that, of course, is that you can put this in a tabular form, which is exactly what we did, which is the 8th page, last page of the Voter's Guide. And you don't have to necessarily agree with each one of these votes, but you can certainly determine at a glance both what the incumbent did and how their opponents claim that they would have voted.
Yeah. And I'm going to go ahead and hold this up for the camera right now. Hopefully we can get a bit of a close-up on this. This is your Voter's Guide, which is a tremendous service to the voters of Duval County. And in all the years that I've been associated with the concerned taxpayers, we are going to get the close-up, folks, so just be patient with us here. This is a tremendous step forward, John, and really something this formal and this well-researched and well-presented is something that's been very different than what I've seen from the concerned taxpayers before. What led to the idea that this was an important thing to produce, and why did you choose to go this route?
One thing that you'll see in the universe of candidate endorsements, you're never presented with reasons why any individual group endorses a candidate. You're never presented with an analysis that comes out of the interviewing process by those groups. Generally speaking, it's a secretive process. In our case, we decided to be utterly transparent with it. After we sent out our questionnaires, we conducted interviews. We interviewed 37 candidates over 4 sessions. We did it in a public place. We did it at the Willow Branch Library. The public was invited to attend, and several members occasionally attended. We videotaped all of those interviews. If you go to our website, there's a link to a YouTube site that has most of those interviews there. Generally edited, but lengthy edits. You can actually, not sound bites, you can actually get a feel for the candidates that way. And then we have, as I say, we have reasons both, not only why to vote for the people that we endorse, but we also have reasons in here why you really don't want to vote for the people that we didn't endorse. And I think that's important. We cover every single race, all 18 contested races. So we have the district races as well as the at-large city council races, and of course the mayor's race and the constitutional officers. Nobody's really put that together that I've seen in 30 years of watching the scene here in Jacksonville. And we have had almost universal acclaim for having done this. You get 1 or 2 people that are very partisan for their candidate who are unhappy that we endorse somebody else. Right. But they can't complain about the process that we took.
I thought it was interesting that you actually had some folks that you repeatedly invited to these interviews and invited to return questionnaires, and you didn't hear from some of them.
No, I mean, in fact, we actually resorted in some cases with the major candidates to sending out certified letters inviting them to interview, so that we knew that, you know, it wasn't simply a question of an email filter and a failure on the part of the candidate committee to.
I mean, I think that it's a fairly interesting position for a candidate to take, given that fiscal responsibility is a big buzzword and a lot of people are talking about it. Obviously, the Concerned Taxpayers is a representative group in the city, and you might wonder why somebody wouldn't respond, maybe what they were afraid of, or the questions maybe that they didn't want to answer.
Well, even more interesting, actually, there were several people that did send in a response, but the response was that they weren't going to answer our questions. And we had either, you know, more or less elaborate reasons as to why they would not.
Yeah, pretty amazing. Phil, I'm going to assume that you applaud this systematic effort to evaluate candidates, and you might even agree with me that for candidates that don't show up, maybe that's even more telling than what their responses to the questions themselves would have been.
Absolutely. In fact, I live in District 5, and I've gotten several mailings from people about how great they are. They're going to cut my taxes, and one of them refused to answer on this, so they're not going to get my vote.
Absolutely, absolutely. And John, I know that the Concerned Taxpayers also has a candidate pledge, and we're going to go ahead and put the overhead up about this. This was not a binding thing. It was not a major thumbs up, thumbs down determiner about whether or not you supported people. But what a wonderful pledge to try to get candidates and incumbents to agree to, that they're going to introduce legislation to seek the repeal of the stormwater fee and tax. They're going to do the same thing to repeal the garbage fee and tax. They are going to again do the same thing around the JEA surcharge fee, that they're going to obey the existing tax cap for the budget 3%, and that they're not going to implement a sales tax without voter input. I mean, I don't know how anybody could cast a vote for somebody who didn't agree with those kind of principles. I mean, I know we're all like minds here, but you even had some endorsed candidates who did not sign that pledge. Is that correct?
No, well, yes, certainly, and we make no mention of who in fact signed the pledge or didn't sign the pledge here, and there were some who were willing to agree to some aspects of it, but not others. But again, I mean, those are tactical decisions that they'd have to make once they're actually on the city council. Our determination is we're trying to base this from a holistic approach. One of the things I don't like to see is using one issue as a bar toward an endorsement. And there are some groups out there that of course take positions on things that are social issues essentially, right. And will use a social issue or a stance on a social issue that we think is irrelevant to running local government as, you know, a reason to support or not support a candidate. We went out of our way to avoid that. I mean, what we are interested in is a candidate who is going to try to do the best thing by the taxpayers of the county. Yeah. And, you know, to the extent that you know, a few hundred hours of work by 9 people could do that, hopefully this is a decent product and a shortcut to voters that, quite frankly, receive nothing but the most stilted views.
Of course.
I mean, a flyer in the mail that says "I'm a true conservative" doesn't tell you very much.
Yeah, very well.
This season, everybody's a true conservative.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it's just the season, huh? Well, we are going to actually start going through the voters guide in some detail in just a second in terms of some specific candidates. And I'm going to ask you for a brief comment on why you endorsed the candidates that you did. But it should be pointed out, just distribution-wise, you've got some of these going out in the Times-Union, you've got some going through other sources, and of course people can download a copy of this guide by going to your website, which we're going to repeat and we're going to put up on the screen in a little bit, which is jaxtaxpayers.org, jaxtaxpayers.org. You also have a contact number, 904-351-8126. Tell us a little bit about the other distribution through the Times-Union and some of the other things that you've done.
Well, we actually managed to obtain sufficient funding to go through 2 printings here. Nearly 100,000 copies have been produced. We have already distributed the entire first printing. We have a second printing that was just done yesterday, which is all going into the Times-Union for distribution on Saturday the 19th. So most of the county will be receiving, subscribers at least at Times Union will be receiving a copy of this 3 days before the election.
Fantastic. And before we get into the actual rundown of the candidates, for folks that are watching the broadcast who maybe want to learn a little bit more about the Concerned Taxpayers, tell us about your meetings, your schedule, and where you have those.
At the moment, we have board meetings. Anybody is welcome to attend a board meeting. The board meetings are on the second Monday of the month. They alternate between the Regency area and the West Side at Piccadilly cafeterias. This month, March, was on the West Side. So next month, April will be in the Regency area, that Piccadilly. And obviously, you can go to the website to get the specifics about that. We are a membership organization, but membership is mere $10. And of course, you can join online.
Yeah.
And we would urge anybody who's interested to check out the information that's available there.
Fantastic, fantastic. All right, well, let's go ahead and cut to the chase and actually get into what some of your the endorsements of the Concerned Taxpayers were. And as I said, I'll ask you to give a little brief commentary as we work our way through the list. So we've got an overhead to go ahead and put up. Obviously, kind of at the top of the ticket, probably the race that's gotten the most media attention is the mayoral race. The Concerned Taxpayers endorsed Mike Hogan, which I know just personally for you, John, has probably got to be maybe a little bit of an interesting endorsement because I know you ran against him a couple of years ago, I believe.
Well, yes, actually, the last person who ran against Mike Hogan was John Winkler in 2003 for tax collector. Obviously, Mr. Hogan prevailed in that race. And probably if you'd asked me a year ago whether or not I would be the chair of a committee that was endorsing Mike Hogan, I might have expressed some reservations about that. But the truth of the matter is, obviously, you have a field that incorporates a couple of folks that seem to have encountered a recent conversion to fiscal responsibility. You have other candidates, as you can read about here, who, for whatever reason, didn't seem terribly concerned about presenting their views to us in particular. And frankly, when we interviewed Mr. Hogan, he was very specific in his responses to our questions about the things that he would do in order to attempt to balance the budget and prevent us from having massive tax increases in order to do so. And we were just impressed by what he had to tell us.
Yeah.
I mean, that happens. And there you are.
Yeah, well, it's been interesting to me that Mr. Hogan, he has, there's so much talk about the difficulty with the pension program, particularly police and fire, in terms of the long-term fiscal requirements around that, obligations around that. He's received endorsements from those unions, although he's gone out of his way to basically say, he's not promised that he's going to support the status quo, that he realizes changes need to be made. Was it interesting to you that he received those endorsements?
Well, it's interesting but not surprising. I know, obviously, both Randy Wise, who's the firefighter president, and Nelson Cuba, who's the Fraternal Order of Police president, are independent forces, and they are going to encourage their membership in ways that have absolutely nothing to do necessarily about promises made. Of that group of candidates, I mean, to them, Hogan is more of a known quantity. He does have union negotiating experience from when he was an executive with AT&T. I think that conceivably could be useful over the course of the next 4 years. But I don't think I don't find it condemning. By any means. The police and fire unions make their own choices based on their own criteria. The first thing that happened in Hogan's case, in fact, the very day we interviewed him, he was opening his campaign headquarters, and he had previously made some statement that Cuba did not like earlier that week. So the policeman declined to send any police over to help him with that. So I can't say that there isn't already a little testiness involved between those unions and the mayoral candidates, and I think there will be.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, they're just by its nature, it's going to be that way.
Good. All right, well, so Mike Hogan is your endorsement. Let's go ahead and put the overhead back up with the next race. We've got tax collector and property appraiser. For tax collector, the Concerned Taxpayers Group is endorsing Dick Kravitz. For property appraiser, Jim Overton. A little commentary on both of those individuals.
Well, particularly about Dick Kravitz. Dick Kravitz actually does have an extensive legislative record that is one of, I think, pretty profound fiscal responsibility, as versus Mike Corrigan, who is actually listed here on the back because he is a sitting city councilman. And out of those 7 votes, 6 of the votes we found to be not the votes that we would have preferred. So, so he came up very short in terms of fiscal responsibility as far as we were concerned. So, and again, we explained in a write-up our reasons, both why we endorse Kravitz and why we intentionally, essentially would not vote for Mr. Corrigan for dog catcher. This is what it boils down to. And then Ryan Taylor, who is a younger candidate who works over at the tax collector's office. I mean, he's a nice guy, but his experience level is a lot more limited than that of Mr. Kravitz.
And how about the endorsement of Mr. Overton?
Overton, and essentially what Kurt Kraft is basing his entire campaign on term limits. There are, of course, no term limits, in fact, for constitutional officers. We're satisfied with the fact that Overton has had to deal with both good times and bad in the property appraisal business. And frankly, we don't have a problem with him staying the course for another 4 years. There's no real reason to change. He's managed that office in a very efficient manner. He's kept it from growing. He's actually reduced his budget consistently over the years.
Good.
We find him endorsable.
Okay, perfect. Well, great. Phil, I guess for you, any reaction to these endorsements? And then while you have the floor, why don't you tell the folks about how they can find out about the local Libertarian Party and about our local activities?
Yeah, I agree. I would never vote for Michael Corrigan. I've heard him speak about issues, and he just can't tax or spend enough. So no more Corrigan. Other than that, I like what they have to say. Don't know about Hogan, but compared to the rest of the people, I mean, the rest of the people are really horrible. So he's the least bad person up there. But if you want to know more about the Libertarian perspective, meet Libertarians in person. We meet at the Golden Corral every third Thursday at 6:30 p.m. Actually, tomorrow we'll be having our meeting. We'll be having special guests. Actually, Victor Wilhelm from Concerned Taxpayers is going to be there talking about the guides. So until the 22nd, we'll be focusing on that. And we'll be having Adrian Wiley, who is a prospective candidate for Libertarian Party of Florida chair. So if you're a Libertarian interested in state-level politics, stop by, ask him some questions.
Fantastic. Thank you for the update on that. All right, great. Back to the, let's go ahead and go back to the endorsement overhead again. At-large one, you've got kind of an interesting position here. Basically, the Concerned Taxpayer is saying anybody but David Taylor. And then for at-large two, John Cressenbenny, which, is interesting perhaps for folks who are thinking that Concerned Taxpayers is nothing but a rubber stamp for Republican candidates. Cressenbenny is actually a Democrat. I believe.
Yes, although we declined to point that out in the runner's guide.
Right, but tell us a little bit about those two candidates, John.
Well, in the case of at-large one, you have Kimberly Daniels, Steve Burnett, and David Taylor that are running. David Taylor is an attorney who has ethical issues. He has several pending bar complaints, one of which is filed by a judge regarding an alleged forgery of a judge's signature on a very strange document that I obtained a copy of in an eviction case that Taylor was conducting on one of his many rental properties. It's just, in my personal view, I find his behavior to be unacceptable.
Okay.
And at the time, Kimberly Daniels and Steve Burnett, we simply really didn't know enough about them, although we interviewed them, in order to enable us to endorse one over the other.
Okay.
But I do think it is important for people to vote in that race because not voting could effectively wind up putting somebody that has serious ethical issues into office. And I would hate to see that happen.
And quickly on Mr. Crescimenti.
Crescimenti is already, he's now in his second round. He's served 2 years on the special election that came out of that race. He has been consistently, I think if you look at his score, he's got 71% by our reckoning. He's been pretty consistently a friend of taxpayer issues. He's also an incredibly responsive individual. He goes out of his way to get information to his constituents, and he does it without having a personal aid.
Yeah, he's foregone that as a budget saving.
He has foregone it, and he manages to pull off greater efficiencies than the people that do have a full-time aid. So there's nothing not to like about Crescimenti.
Great. I'm going to ask you to comment on Juan Diaz and Jim Robinson, and we're going to do it quickly because we actually, believe it or not, winding down to the end of the broadcast.
There you go.
But we do have one more slide to put up as well. So we've got the Juan Diaz and Jim Robinson, and then we have these other endorsements here. I'm sure that you probably would mention something about Clay Yarborough in terms of his long record of fiscal responsibility. But tell us about these races and any specific comments you want to make about it.
There's 3 parties in that race. Diaz and Robinson interviewed with us, and frankly, the third candidate didn't bother to. We like both of them, endorse them. Robin Lum has been around for a while, had a 100% score by our responses. Clay Yarborough is very consistently, incredibly consistently, a friend of the taxpayer in our view. We just gave him another Friend of the Taxpayer award for last year. Bill Bishop, again, has been one of the strongest voices for transparency and in trying to get the budget process as open as it can be to everyone in the city. Marco Rubio is running against Richard Clark. Richard Clark had interesting problems, in our view, with the Jaguars leaving the meeting early and going over to the steakhouse with the lobbyists, among other things.
Right.
We have Steve Hires in District 5. That's your district, Phil. They're actually, he impressed us with his climb from nowhere into being a strong small businessman with views like ours.
And then you had a couple of races, of course, where you actually you had several strong candidates, 6, 7, and 13, and that's why there was no endorsement. We do have one more overhead very, very quickly to put up that just to kind of round out. And I know that you feel strongly about these candidates as well. Joe Andrews, longtime member of the Concerned Taxpayers of Duval County as well.
Yes, and and I don't think there are any bad choices in District 12, to be absolutely honest with you. But again, read the guide for the reasoning there.
Right.
Doug Moore is running against 2 candidates, one of whom sort of had a hard time getting to meet us, and that's pretty much it. I mean,
great.
You see what you see.
Yep.
Go to the guide.
We've got one more overhead to put up just around the contact information for the Concerned Taxpayers. Hopefully it will become there we go. For more information, again, it is jaxtaxpayers.org. You can download a copy of this voter's guide. The phone number up there as well, 351-8126. And of course, you have your own cable show, which airs on Thursday night, so I encourage people to take a look at that. So
do we.
John, thank you so much for taking time out to appear on our broadcast and do this quick overview. Of course, we applaud you very much for these efforts to educate the public in terms of candidates that are going to be fiscally responsible, and a big thumbs up from us here on the Libertarian Perspective in terms of your efforts.
Well, thank you very much.
Phil, thank you again as always. Folks, thanks for tuning in. Libertarian Perspective, Wednesdays at 7 o'clock here on Comcast Community Access and at other times during the viewing schedule. Remember to vote on March the 22nd. We'll see you next time on the Libertarian Perspective.